Today's guest learned how to build a business from nothing after a partnership breakup left him with no clients, no cash flow, and no work backlog, and almost $500,000 in debt. He spent most of his early career obsessing about understanding what drives business success, but more importantly, how to create a life by design through entrepreneurship and business. Today, he helps business owners and entrepreneurs build meaningful businesses so they can have more profit, fans, and freedom. Please welcome Mel Abraham to the show. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you? It's so good to be here.
Good. Yeah, I'm excited to talk today. So many good things we're going to touch on.
Oh my God, I'm excited. There's just so much going on that we can do. So
Totally. And I think today's topic is so important because it's something that a lot of small business owners are still dealing with as we kind of, go back to normal life, whatever that might look like, but also we're kind of potentially headed into a recession. So I'm excited to talk about your thoughts about that. So first and foremost, let's talk about what can small businesses do to prepare for and protect their finances during a recession or a potential market downturn.
So here's the deal. First off, I actually think we are in a recession. So we're here. Technically, so we need to operate in it. But here's the thing that I think we ought to be looking at is that during fat times we get fat. I mean, in the sense that we get lazy, we're spending money in places that we don't need to spend it, but we're not as concerned because it doesn't really affect us. So it becomes really important at this point to look at every dollar going out to see what the return on that dollar is. Now, here's the way to look at this. It can be a return on investment. In other words, for every dollar going out, I get a bunch of dollars back. So I get a multiple of the dollar going out, which is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, am I getting a return on an investment in the currency of time or in efficiency? In other words, in your case, if you hire someone and it gives you 10 hours more back to you a week or a month, and you can use those 10 hours for revenue generating activities, indirectly, that has an ROI. And too often we don't think about that. Or alternatively, a dollar going out to create efficiency. In other words, you're bringing in a process to eliminate the manual work to get things done faster, easier, and more consistently. And I think that one of the first things we should be doing is spending time with our credit card statements, spending time with our profit and loss statements. If you aren't good with reading financials, now's the time to do it. And take a look at everything that's going out and making sure that it makes sense and that it's bringing something else in.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I talk about that all the time, that it's good to make sure that you know where your money is going, because so oftentimes, like you mentioned, when times are good, we're spending money and we're like, I don't need to look at that. It's fine. But now that we're here, it's time to start tightening up a little bit.
Well, and I think that the other side of that is if you haven't done so already, have these conversations with your team in the sense that not as if you're lecturing them, but you're enrolling them in the process and giving them the ability to impact the process. So if they now start to look through the eyes, now they're not owners, they probably won't have the same vested interest as you will as an owner, but we can adjust their compensation structure to hit on those points where they start to think a little more like an owner, and they're not going, it's like the kid that's just, hey, mom, dad, just put it on a credit card, and because they don't think about the other side of it, that it's got to get paid. We get our team on board to creating an optimized organization, an optimized business, and think through the eyes of impact and profits. Now things start to shift because you have everyone in the boat rowing the same way.
Absolutely. And I like that you brought up the fact earlier about, bringing on employees that could potentially save us not only time and money, but really reevaluating our employees, what they're currently doing, what their positions are, maybe even what they're doing on a day-to-day business, so that we can make sure that they're working to their maximum potential. Do you have any tips on how to kind of evaluate each of our people to make sure they're working as efficient as possible?
So here's the thing that I think every person should have what I call a prime metric, some mechanism that if they and when they perform on that metric, it actually will translate to something better for the business, better for the bottom line. And I'll give you for instance, one that I actually got wrong originally. And that is that originally I brought on a social media person that I wanted these posts. And so they were hitting the posts like they were supposed to, checking the list. But it's the wrong metric, because we can post 100 times a day, or we can post one time a day, or once every other day, and it doesn't drive anything other than the posts. And so what we really had to look at is that the actual metric to measure that person by is follower growth and engagement. And so when we start to look through those eyes and say, here's what we want. What do we want to achieve in this quarter for follower growth and engagement? All right. You get their buy-in. The people support what they create. So we don't shove it down them. We co-create it with them. And now they're vested in that. And you say, you get that? All right, you're good. Now we have something that drives that, and we can evaluate against that, because I know that if my follower growth goes up, if the engagement goes up, then the likelihood is that my list is building, my downloads of my show are building. And ultimately, at some point, when we turn around and do some sort of campaign or promotion, that we should generate a greater level of sales, because we have a greater and deeper relationship with the people that came in.
I love creating that partnership with team members where it's not just us as bosses telling employees what to do, but really, like you mentioned, co-creating that along with them, because it's so much more engaging for them too when we can partner like that. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it's so important. Now, recently on your podcast, you spoke about the importance of community, and I think this is a perfect segue into this, because when we're navigating uncertainty, what are your thoughts about that? Tell us more.
So here's what I see happening now. Mind you, I'll age myself. I'm not a youngster. I'm 61, but I act like a 12-year-old according to my wife. But so I've seen a few things. I've also made a lot of mistakes with respect to running businesses, building wealth, and doing those things. However, here's what I've noticed. When things get uncertain, or when things become challenging, the tendency is to be myopic. The tendency is to shrink down. The tendency is to curl up in a fetal position and hold on until the storm passes. The problem is that doesn't serve us in the long run. When there's times of uncertainty, this is the time that we should actually step into expansion, step into reaching out, step into the situation of saying, I don't want to be alone traveling these uncertain waters. I want to know that there's even if they don't have a solution, if I simply know that there's 3 other people in the room having the same problem, I go, oh, it's not just me. It's not just me. And there's some solace and peace in that. But more importantly is that once we get that solace and peace, we can actually have a real dialogue. What have you tried? What is going on? What's next? I'm going to try this. What about this? And so what we can do when we have community is, 1, we can find some solace and peace in knowing that we're not alone. 2, we have a sounding board that allows us to bounce ideas, massage ideas, and check perspective that maybe we wouldn't otherwise have if we're siloed. And 3, we look at it and say, oh, what I'm feeling is normal. I'm okay. And I think those are the first things that happen. And then what happens with a community is that it's their networks that actually come into play also, because they go, oh, I know someone that can help you with that. Let me connect you with them. But if we're sitting in a closet somewhere scared, then we're not going to move. So rather than be scared, we need to be prepared, and we can start moving forward.
And reaching out, and I think that so many times we've all been at events where everybody's like, oh yeah, this month we're killing it. Things are amazing. But we never really talk about like, hey, like I just dealt with this really huge challenge. It was horrible. What was your experience with this? And so creating that dialogue back and forth with people, and just like you said, knowing that we're not alone. We've all faced things as business owners. If you haven't yet, it's going to come.
It's coming.
Being able to reach out and say, hey, just so you know, this pitfall's there. Make sure, just jump over it. Don't fall in it like I did. It's just that community is so huge. And I think that brings us to a really huge point, is that, is it really possible to grow our businesses during market downturns and recessions?
So if we simply look at the companies that were started during recessions, FedEx, Uber, there's so many, Disney, all of them were started during downturns. And why is that? I think because when we start getting our back pushed against the wall, when we start looking, this is why people go, Mel, are you scared about the market? And I go, no, I'm not, because I believe in the innovative ingenuity of the American people, of the American economy, and actually the worldwide economy. And that when we get our back pushed against the wall, what happens is we start to refine our thinking. We start to say, well, what if I were to recreate something and look at things differently based on the fact that things are different? What would I do differently? And I think that these downturns, one, are necessary. They're cycles in business. They're going to force us to be introspective. They're going to force us to look at how we do business. They're going to force us to look at why we do business. And they're going to force us to look at, can we do business differently and do money differently and do wealth differently and do all those things differently. And when we do that, there's nowhere to go but to grow. And I think that's the reason that this can happen. Now, if we hold on tightly to the way things were, if we hold on tightly to the way that it used to be, the good old days, then we will go down with the ship. Okay? Because just look at what happened to Blockbuster Video. Okay, the fact of the matter is, complacency is the first step to crisis. And when we get complacent and believe that we are infallible, it's the first step to crisis. The next step may be the grave. And you look at it from that perspective. Polaroid, okay, even Kodak got blindsided with the digital photography. Blockbuster Video. I mean, there's a whole host of them that got left behind because they were so stuck in their ways. The recession puts pressure on us to rethink and retool and reskill our business. And I think that's the gift in it if we choose to take it.
I agree. I was going to even say, like, more at a local level, like 2 restaurants in my community. One was like, well, just got to give up. Here comes COVID. We're not going to do anything. We're just got to roll over. We've got to shut the whole thing down. Versus another one who said, okay, how do we get food in the hands of our people that are now eating at home versus eating in the restaurant? And it breeds this ingenuity and these thoughts that, why not try it? You never know. It might work. So some businesses are so successful because of that thinking.
Here's an interesting statistic. I just did a keynote presentation literally yesterday. There was a study in 2016, 2017, an Italian study, 116 entrepreneurs. They brought these people in that were starting a business, and they put them through a 3 to 4 month training program, and they split them. 50% of them were trained just in the traditional business and all of the business principles. The other 50% were trained in the same principles, but they were also taught a professor's or scientist's mentality. They were told that the strategy that they're creating was simply a thesis. It was simply a hypothesis that when they went to market, it was simply there to test. And what they found, and then they told them that, so you can change it. You're testing to see what it gives you. Now, what they found a year later, the ones that were trained in the scientist thing, in the professor type of thing, the thesis thinking, they literally, their revenues were 40 times greater than the control group. And they looked at it and they said, why is that? And they found that they were 2 times more likely to pivot, 2 times more likely to look at things and say, all right, well, that test didn't work. Let's keep going. And they didn't allow their ego and their belief to get in the way to say, no, I know this is going to work. I'm just going to keep hitting my head against the wall till it works. And I think that when we look at things with a curiosity, so it's a matter of coming to it with humility instead of pride and curiosity instead of conviction. And now when we approach our problems with that way and say, hey, I wonder what if, let's try it. Then you're not so bent on this better work, this better work. You're bent on what information is it going to give me so I can make a better decision so we will be successful over time.
Absolutely. What do you think when we talk about, like, the biggest thing is fear, right? I mean, when COVID was looming over our heads and we were all kind of like trying to figure out what to do, and a lot of us came together in groups and we're like, okay, how are we going to make it through? What are some ways that you think business owners could leverage fear during these downturns? Like, how are they, if you're so fearful, but how do you get over that?
So this is a great question. So when it comes to business now, so we're talking about business fear. We're not talking about fear for my life. Okay.
No, just business fear. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the way I look at it. Typically, fear in business is a result of the lack of something. Okay. And when we solve that lack, then we solve the fear. And here's what I mean. It could be a lack of clarity on the problem, a lack of clarity on what's causing the fear, a lack of clarity on the things. And so what we need to first do is say, I got to get clear on it. The second is that it could be a lack of information. I simply don't understand. I don't get it. And so now it's our job to get additional information, to get additional training, to get skilled up, to understand, to associate other things, resources in to allow us to understand. And so when we have clarity and we have information, the third lack is the lack of action. We don't act on the information. We don't act on what the clarity is. And so we can't expect that things are going to change if we don't take action. But the reason we take the action is not to solve the problem. The reason to take the action is, going back to the scientist mentality, is to get additional information to make a better decision and more action going forward. And I think that those are probably the first levels of fear. And so when a client comes to me and says, I'm scared, I go, wait, let's step back. Let's make sure we're clear. Let's make sure we have the information. Let's understand our action first. And then we can start to move through the other elements of fear. But I think the reality is that in business, typically a fear is a result of a lack of something. And when we find out what that lack is and fill that void, the fear will dissipate.
Well, and that, by you distilling it down like that, it is so simple. I feel like as small business owners, we tend to complicate things and, make it as complicated as possible, when really we just need to simplify it. And by doing what you said, that really takes a lot of the scariness away, because you just need to do it.
Yeah. And I think if you start to hear yourself saying, well, you don't understand. What that is the ego talking. And I know this may be confronting for some, but if I'm going to be a good coach or a good mentor to someone, I'm going to be direct with a loving heart. But that's your ego talking to say, I don't want to let go of the past. But we can't swing from vine to vine if we try to hold on to the other vine. And so we have to let go. I heard it put this way, that and we can look at it from the money standpoint, we can look at it from the business standpoint, but we can either have it be the accelerator or the brake, but not both. And so if that fear is the catalyst, the signal to move, which it should be, versus the signal to freeze, then that's the way to look at it. Too often we look at fear as oh my gosh, and we have those three responses: flight, freeze, or fight. But there's only one of those responses that's going to move you forward, and that's fight. So flight and freeze isn't it's just not to your benefit. So now we got to look and say, all right, I'm going to choose to fight. That now means that I need more information, I need more clarity, I need more action, and I need more direction, I need more community, and I get to move forward.
I love it. So many good things that we have talked about today. And one question for you is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a small business owner that's currently struggling?
Gosh, you know what?
There's so many, right?
There is, but I think that probably the biggest thing would be to get perspective in the sense, and what I mean by that is that if you're not in a coaching program, if you're not in a mentorship or a mastermind, if you're not in a community where you can share the pain, where you can share the frustration, where you can share the fear, and you can talk it through and move through it, because listen, you might be running a restaurant, but there might be someone that is a mechanic that is in this thing, and yet they have a new perspective. They go, hey, have you thought about this? And believe it or not, when you bring in perspectives from other industries, people that see the blind spots that maybe you don't see because you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label, I think that starts to move you faster, because what it requires you to show up with is the humility and understanding that you don't know it all, and that maybe we made some mistakes, but it's not about beating yourself up. It's about taking the lessons from those and moving forward.
It's not about the setback. It's about the comeback, right?
It is.
Yep. So where can people connect with you? Because you've got a podcast, you're all over social media. Where is the best place that people can connect with you if this episode has resonated with them?
Oh my God, I'd love to hear from them. My show is the Affluent Entrepreneur Show, and so I'd love to have them there. Instagram, Mel Abraham 9. I have no idea who the first 8 are. So and send me DMs. I'm totally cool with it. I do a regular live broadcast where I call it Money Mentoring Over Coffee, and I bring on people to coach them. I answer questions. They submit questions. So here's what I believe. We are in a society that doesn't want to talk about wealth. They don't want to talk about money. They demonize business. But yet, if we look at everything around us, it's driven by business. It's driven by those things. And so I want a place to have safe, sane conversations where no one's trying to sell you an investment. No one's trying to sell you anything. And that's what we're creating, and is a community where we can do that and bring everyone forward, because I believe no matter what the problem is in our world, in our society, if we put it in the hands of the innovative entrepreneurs, they'll find a way to solve it.
Oh my gosh. And I always say, like, us small business owners, like, we literally are changing the world. And when we work together, it is even more of a massive change that we can create. So being able to jump into this community with you would be huge. And I'm going to go ahead and link all those links inside the show notes so people have quick reference to it. So thank you again so much for being here. So many golden nuggets. I am so excited that you were able to spend some time with us. Thank you again for being here.
Oh my God, thanks for having me. This was a blessing. Doing this and serving is where I get a ton of joy. So you've given me a gift. I appreciate you.
Thank you.